thank you. Thank you for coming along to this. So it's about innovation. How and what would you invest in, and what, how do you evaluate something? How do you evaluate a project? How do you evaluate teams, their attitude? I think that's really sort of the thing for us, which is really important. Whether it's people that are joining us, whether it's when we looked to invest in this company and grow it. So beating biases, and I'll talk a wee bit more. That is really kind of the main theme of this, and I'll elaborate just a wee bit on that. Human beings have, we would say, have degrees of freedom. But if we don't use them and we don't beat the biases, and sometimes we don't even know that we're actually being biased and we're just reacting on something that we have learned through life. And it's actually quite a it's a very hard thing to do, to break away from what is almost your reaction, your automatic reaction to things. We in the company call it conditioning. So if you're conditioned, we're sitting in a university, and I would say there's a very eminent professor in this university said, honest to God, sometimes I wonder, and I fear that we do brainwash. We actually brainwash people, because you've got to be careful when you give people information and you give them science or you give them knowledge, and they take it as truth. And how do you get even students and people to think that this is just the state of the art, this is not the end game, there's much more to go for. I'm going to give you three scenarios or three stories and some highlights from the classical things that I think you'll have all have met. And these are signs of where taking a project to market, or even getting a team to look at and innovate and discover new things. Because if you're conditioned, how are you going to discover new things? How are you going to exert your creativity, be imaginative, if you don't break away from this sort of mental pattern that you've actually been given? So these, I've 40 years experience. How many times have I and my team heard this? You go to someone and you've got a great new capability, you've got a software, and you go, well, I have 40 years experience in this industry, and you're going to tell me that you would be amazed. You actually want to sit there and go, can I record you and play this back to you? Because you cannot believe it's precisely why you really need to sort of wake up and do something different. But that would be impolite. And then you've got this other thing, which, if you're in a technology company, or if you're in the academic world, and I think even people will say, but this is a well-established theory. And I must say, we kind of say, so is it a God-given theory? Is it written in tablets of stone? Shall it not be challenged ever? Is this not anti-science if you can't do that? And I think that's the thing we try, even within our company at ThinkTank Maths, to work with academic groups. And say, you have to help people while you're educating them to know that this is just almost a brain gym. You're actually looking for them to learn something and then imagine outside it and beyond it. And I think that's the key thing. And then I don't get rewarded for taking risk. And even if they never say those words, actually the reference here is great. It's Jules Goddard, who's London School of Economics, and The Fatal Bias. If you haven't read it, I kind of now send this link to clients who tell me that, it's too risky, and, we're looking at cost cutting. And what he points out is that this is the classic 1990s, the 1990s, 1980s, some of the big five corporate, consultancies who focused on you have to cut costs, cut costs, cut costs. He says, and actually what they should be doing is looking at increasing revenue, how to earn new revenue, and actually you have to spend money, but spending that, and he actually said the companies that are least cost effective are actually the most innovative and the most successful. It's a very, very useful paper to read. I'm just trying to show you here sort of, there's a kind of stir this up and whichever you're in. And then you've got this other, we've got clients who say, who can we get on this project, who'll champion it? And they'll say, well, we'll go to, we can't go to some of the folk that have been here for too long, because they'll be I'm here for 40 years and I can't really do anything about this. And, they're challenging me and everything I've published and everything I've done and my entire existence, for God's sake. And then you've got, they actually go to some of the younger folk who've just come in, and you'd think, well, we'll go to the new recruits, the new engineers that have come into the company, And they kind of go, well, wait a minute, I've just spent 5 years at university and I've got a PhD and whatever, and I want to apply what I've learned, and you're now telling me I have to set this aside. But you know, if they're, for example, if they're an engineer who's gone through a petroleum engineering course, does that mean that everything they learned from, you know, that's in the literature is the end game for humanity? You know, it really is it's quite the dilemma, and it's the world we live in, it's the world I live in. So my colleague is here as well, who's our chief scientist. Tears his hair out on. And then this one is one that when I was looking to invest in companies back, and we were looking to invest in companies back in the early 2000s, 2002-ish, and you would get, you know, a startup spin out of the university, and somebody would say, "Oh, I'm not sales. I'm not sales." And I remember even trying and saying, you know, a whole room of folk, "Put your hand up if you're sales." Well, you would. But you know, but they sat with their arms folded, and it was almost like, sales? That's kind of like, you know, that's like the lowest of the low. And that, you know, I don't have to explain that. I think if you can impart and enthuse, and I'm going to take you through a couple of case studies through these 3 stories. The last one is a bit of a mind teaser, but these 3 are businesses that I was involved in my career. And it's actually quite interesting and relevant as to what's going on sort of around our cities at the moment on environment. This is the story of, if you see, it's polyurethanes. I was with ICI Polyurethanes, and I was asked to go to the division over in Brussels. And the issue was that you'd use this substance called chlorofluorocarbons. So it's a story about chemistry, clever chemistry. And chlorofluorocarbons were very, very good at insulation. So it was used for the insulation in fridges, and great project. It was used in aerosols. It was used everywhere. DuPont made it, and they, you know, megatons of this stuff, and it was great. Except they didn't realize that when it went up into the atmosphere, it started to cause holes in the ozone. And of course, how do you actually prove that you're causing holes in the ozone? And DuPont made a statement. I very recently discovered this movie, which is the battle for energy, economy, and environment, called The Shattered Sky, which tells the whole story. And you discover there's these sort of scientists who suspect that this is what's happening. DuPont actually make a statement eventually that if it's proven that these CFCs are causing a hole in the ozone, they will shut down within a year their manufacturing plant, and they will no longer sell it. And actually another bit of interest, so you're talking about attitudes. Apparently, which I had missed in this whole story, although I was commercializing polyurethane foam to the furniture and mattress industry across Europe, which was removing CFCs. And even there, I come back to biases. You know, you go to the foamers and they go, well, you know, when somebody else does it, I'll do it next, but I'm not going first. And of course, you had companies like Bayer and large organizations who were just saying, thank you very much, we've got, you know, the lion's share of the market, and we're not about to kind of move away from this stuff. So we had to kind of convince people. So we went out, as I say, to the foamers, and what we had to do is we had to find. I'm a great believer in look at your, you know, in any project that you're looking at, and if a group who are trying to get a product to market or trying to develop a product, not only do you have to think out the box, how are you going to do this? I mean, the answer actually was, and this is a rather bizarre thing, the answer actually was you could use water to expand flexible foam. Water. It would react and cause the expansion like a loaf, so it would actually cause it to rise, and it was more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. But again, still the people that would buy the chemical from ICI weren't willing to move. So I went to lots of trade fairs and talked to the people who made mattresses and furniture and whatever, and discovered the design world, the guys who designed things like this. This is a company called Moroso, which is in a lovely Trieste, beautiful area, and I actually hired someone who did PR for the furniture trade body, and she was able to take me around a lot of the top manufacturers in Italy, and we kind of around the furniture conference or the annual trade fair, we got designers from, you know, some of the top designers. So Ron Arad, You know, you don't know Ron Arad. He does that lovely bookshelf, that funny sort of bookshelf. So he designed this, made of water lily comfort cushioning. You'll notice we don't call it water lily polyurethane foam, we call it comfort cushioning. And we even got a really snazzy little logo and everything to go with it. Which, by the way, they had the ticket, you know, they had a lovely ticket sort of on their furniture, and they had it in their brochures saying they were using water lily comfort cushioning. And this design of Ron Arad is actually in the MoMA now, made with this product. The other thing that happened at this conference, this exhibition we were at, because we put it on in the Museum of Science and Technology, so you had to sort of break down, you had to find somebody who were going to be what I would call your change champions. And I think that was really sort of the key to this. And it was the designers who teamed up with the furniture manufacturers, and we put on this fantastic show of all these, you know, really, some of them were absolutely loopy. You would never have bought it in your life. Some of them were very nice, the pieces of furniture. But it was in the Museum of Science and Technology, in the room, the Leonardo da Vinci room. And it was packed. It was a kind of off-fair event. And the chief designer from IKEA came. I didn't know it until I got back to my office on the Monday, and he phoned me, and he said, hello, I was at your thing. He said, I couldn't find you when you were there, but I want to make a range of furniture for IKEA. Yes. So there you go. So I think it's about changing expectations. So we did, and by the way, the story is DuPont shut down. They cut it down because it was NASA who discovered that this really was causing a hole in the ozone. So there is hope. And by the way, the Montreal Protocol is still there to be able to use for anything else that humanity gets up to in the next decade or so, or right now. So this is the next one that I was very, very closely involved in. And this is funny because I actually went, it was my kind of next role, and I went down, I think it was in Frankfurt Airport, and I met this very interesting man wearing sandals, and said he was heading over to the USA, and he had this company that was doing this thing called a zip drive. I was like, what? You know, I just really wasn't in this world at all, coming from the chemical industry. And so I went back to the office, and I went down to our IT department. I said, have you heard of a zip drive? And he said, oh, God. I said, well, I've got an interview. Oh, if you could get us one of those, that would be great. So I thought, right, this might be something. But I was speaking to Ian Ritchie here, and Ian was telling me he was actually on the board. You were an investor, actually, in the company. Were you an advisor? Were you an advisor? No? No, you weren't? Okay, you just knew the company. Anyway, the floppy is dead. This was at the time in the 1990s where you couldn't store, you know, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have bandwidth that was available. And you couldn't store your PowerPoint presentation on a floppy disk anymore, so you couldn't transport it anywhere unless you actually went physically with your laptop and put it on it. So it was a company in Scotland that designed, if you like, actually did the science, did the scientific bit. But the whole of the creativity, creating a little dinky box. And by the way, also you're talking about mindsets and change. People were, we were going into Media Markt and going into the FNAC and going, because that was my role, and going into PC World, and they were saying an external zip drive. Nobody's going to accept that. That's rubbish. You know, they want to put it inside their machine. You know, can you not do the same in the floppy? I said, well, we will, but you know, by the time we get all of the major computing manufacturers to change and put one of these in, we'll have burned out the cash. So we're really going to have to sell it like this. And it really was the start of something very new and interesting. And as you can see, I mean, my target year one was $300 million US, which I, with the team, achieved, including the sales team. And then the second year it was $600 million US of revenue. And we did do that. And the company was a $2 billion company after only 3 years of existence, and then the rest is history. You know, we didn't get the click, and we didn't get whatever. But that's, again, it's about. And who did we work with? We actually worked with the Chasm Group. I brought my. This was it, Crossing the Chasm. I don't know if it's gone out of date, but it's still damn good when you're trying to get the mainstream market to buy a new technology. Huh? It's still in print. It's still in print. Crossing the Chasm. We worked with the Chasm Group to try to find the mainstream users. And again, it's about how do you find what I would call those change champions for you when you're in a business. And I think that's what you really need to do when you're evaluating a company, is to see, do the people have this appetite for change, appetite for questioning, appetite for moving stuff around. So running short, but this is a story 3 is a story in the making. And I could say it is the story of ThinkTank Maths to a great extent. And, the next, we're all out, there's people demonstrating around the country, on some of the environmental issues, but you can hear the issue of, mad machines or, machines replacing people's jobs, and people are concerned about the whole artificial intelligence. And we would suggest, and that's what we say, is it artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence? And I'm just putting this out here. I'm not going to give any answers because I think this is a story in the making, but it's something that we all have to think about. And again, if we come at it with biases and with a lack of imagination, we are going to miss a trick. And so just a question that's posed is, why are we thinking human-centric? Why are we thinking of a parody of human cognition? Why are we thinking of, machines that replace what human beings do, rather than thinking of some form of complementarity? Human beings are very good, I've just said that, imagination, creativity, discovery, very good at all of those things. We forget, we don't do, we forget, we can't parse over 100, data points at one time. Machines can. And I think for that, I would say, if we've got some kind of trusted reasoning, so something which is actually communicating, and there's a two-way communication, I think this is probably the footprint of systems which would be useful to humanity, I think, going forward, and the kinds of things that we want to do and change. So that's just to give you an idea again. I think if we hunker down and we just think of what is the almost obvious and automatic, we could be missing a trick. And I think there are things here which, and certainly the people we're working with in industry, are looking more at augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. So there you are. I hope that's been able to give you an insight into some of those. And I end with this, which just says, beat your biases, step out of your comfort zone, relentlessly challenge and explore, find and engage those change champions, those people somewhere in that. This was actually part of our Water Lily Comfort Cushioning. It was from a drop of water, an ocean of technology, but it actually was very useful for me because I imagined that you threw this technology into a pool of water, and every one of those ripples represented your effect on that market. And then you have to examine every one of those ripples. They represent the supply chain, they represent players, they represent dogma, they represent whatever. See how you change it. So understand and address the motivations and objections in that ecosystem. And then find out everybody in that ecosystem, what is the value of your offering? And somehow in that process, you will come up with some of the answers to making a successful business. I hope that has been useful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you very much.